Okay. Before we start the lesson today, we're going to go ahead and uh, try an exercise in comparison. So what you're going to do is the following here. So think about, and if you're home on your own or outside of the class here, you're going to try to make a comparison. So instead of introducing yourself to a group here, what I want you to do is go ahead and make a comparison between you and someone in your family or a friend. Doesn't matter who it is, but you're going to go ahead and make a comparison of physical traits between the two of you. Okay? And again, use their names in the explanation itself here. So, and then in your second row for your document response, you're going to go ahead and compare a difference between primary and secondary sources. So first of all, you want to be able to make that comparison with that other person here. And you want to think about the category of analysis. You want to actually think about a specific physical trait and make that comparison. Okay? And with that particular idea in mind here, you're going to go ahead and read the document in the document responses on primary and secondary sources and make a comparison using a category of analysis based on your own choice. So go ahead and pause the video right here and go and complete this document response. Again, you want to think about a specific category of analysis, something specific that you're comparing the two with. All right, let's go ahead and get to the lecture portion here. We're going to examine the rise of complex human societies. And before we do so, we want to take a look at the big picture. So what we're going to examine is the context of not just the lecture, but also this particular unit, discuss what history is before we actually enter into some of the actual content that we've been reading about in the textbook. So one of the first skills and reasoning abilities that you need to be able to create is what we call context. Okay? Unlike other history classes, AP World History is a vast curricula. And so what this class is going to be about is various broad strokes. Instead of minutia, dates, and details, it's about, look, here's this vast time period. Okay? What does this actually mean? Okay? And so we're going to try to figure out the big picture of these time periods, these regions, and these groups here. And so we're going to try to examine, therefore, the context of the unit of study that we're trying to generate here. And so this is the timeline of the class itself. And we are here right now in period 0. This is before the requirements on the AP exam, but again, what is often known as the ancient period. And so what we're going to try to generate and figure out is what are some of the qualities of these early human societies during this particular time period? How is it that historians are able to kind of sort through the thousands of years of human events and be able to make these generalizations of what we call historical processes of what is going on during this time period? So as I go through the lecture, make sure you have the Google document open up. There's a question on context. So listen in and be able to figure out, look, what is this period, period 0, during this time period? What is this time period about? Okay, let's go ahead and begin. This is often known as the Neolithic Revolution, and it is a dramatic turn in human existence. So again, the way that humans have survived, hunting and gathering, with all its qualities in regards to the men going out to hunt, the women more reliably actually being able to obtain food through gathering, and the social structure they're able to generate where in a lot of ways women were more important because they actually gathered more food than the men could hunt. But either way, this way of living, this style of human existence changes. As human beings start to figure out, hey, every time we return to this river valley, there are the same crops. What if we decided to actually grow those crops? And see if we can survive this way. And instead of following the herd from point A to point B and trying to survive that way, humankind decide, hey, we're going to stay here, and we're going to actually try to grow these crops so that we don't have to go anywhere, that we have every year annually, you have these reliable crops that we're able to harvest. And so the change from hunting and gathering to what we call sedentary farming. You now remain in one place, sedentary. Now, there's another means of human existence we call pastoralism, the domestication and raising of animals. We'll get to that later on. But what we're examining is the creation of these human farming communities. And their ability to be able to figure out the use of tools is what we often call the Neolithic Neolithic revolution, or what another term for Neolithic is the New Stone Age, right? The ability of humans to create and implement tools for themselves. Okay? And as a result of this, as a result of their ability to domesticate not just simply animals, which we're used to here, but the domestication of crops as well, being able to select, the biggest, the most nutritious, the ones that grow the fastest or more reliably. That's all the process of domestication. And like we saw in Guns, Germs, and Steel, that happened more particularly in places like Afro-Eurasia. Um, it's not just simply the new Stone Age domestication, but is the ability to form tools, not just of stone, but also of metals as well. The discovery of, putting copper and tin in a hot fire and being able to create malleable metals such as bronze and later on iron. All of this is going to create in the end the ability of humankind to create farming villages. So again, now they're able to grow crops, but they need to have some kind of social organization, right, where unique specialists will gather together to create these tools and so forth. And so now people are coming together, and so we see instances of this early in human society. One of the early dig sites is one called Katahuyok in modern day Turkey. That's one of the early ancient ones that we're able to find, but in the last 15, 20 years, we've been finding sites of human agriculture even earlier than these that we had discovered previously. And one consequence of this is in many hunter-gatherer societies, it's usually the groups that travel together oftentimes were kin groups, right? Family, extended family, and so forth. This continues to be one of the means, the key and primary means of human existence, that families gathered together, families supported one another. But as they join together into farming villages, what we start to see are new political organizations. And so again, settled society now means that different groups are gathered together in one central location. And so these central locations, these villages, are going to grow into cities and result in the process of urbanization. But what that's also going to generate are political elites that sometimes are based off of family groups, but sometimes they're not. What we call these impersonal governments. So we'll get to more of that later on here, but all of that is going to formulate in what we call complex society. So as farmers gather together in order to meet common needs and common goals as a means of survival, they're going to need to organize. And that organization is going to create a budding of what many people call civilizations. And so farming and agriculture is, from this, you're able to generate what we call surplus, right? More crops than you need. And now you can store that in a place whereby not everybody has to farm. And so those who do not farm, or those who don't have to, are going to gather together into these urban centers, these cities and towns. And they are going to be what we call specialists. Now, you want to think about, you may want to even pause the video here and brainstorm unique tasks that people have, special skills that will help to create a more solidified society, one that is going to continue to generate this surplus, building tools, building skills, and so forth here. And so specialists like metal workers, scribes, even religious specialists, priests, medicine men, shaman, that in the ancient society, look, if you want rain to happen, then you got to pray for it, right? So you need organization to do that as well. But you have unique specialists that are going to bring about unique developments in human society, because again, they're doing more than just simply farming. And one of those specialists happen to be merchants. And so you see the establishment of long distance trade. If some city far away has goods that you might need, you need to connect with them and take the risk, the cost, and the organization necessary to make long distance trade happen. But much more on that in subsequent units as well. If you get specialists, some of them are going to see themselves as more important than others. And so as a result of this, there is social stratification. Groups that are going to say, hey, we are better than you, we are more necessary than you, therefore we get exclusive privileges for ourselves, unique rights. And so we start to see the generation of social classes as well. Furthermore, hey, you have most groups have religion, but more and more so we start to get organized religion as well, hey, where there are certain rituals, hey, and certain rules and laws that will help to generate order in a society, but then also to create unique things that you might need in your particular society, like certain prayers for rain, for defense, and fertility and others, but you have a means to do so in order to generate this. So organized religions as well. Okay? And for organized religions, for economic exchange, there's a need to develop some kind of written form of record keeping. And so there was creation of various written languages in these early societies. It's not in all of them, but it is definitive, and it allows us to be able to examine the history because we get a written record of this. Not only that, but we also get record of arts and architecture through some of the sites that we're able to find. More so, as these societies become more complex, you need a means of governance. And so many of these cities become capital cities, centers of administration and political centers. Okay? So as a result of this, what we can do and what we're going to do in this class is to be able to make a comparative analysis across these civilizations and these empires. Now, there are a number of different ways to do this in AP World History. The acronym I'm going to use is using these really familiar terms: political, religious, economic, social, environment, and technology, to generate qualities and characteristics of these civilizations so that we can use it for comparative analysis. And we just discussed comparison. How do you make comparison? Well, you take topics like, say, for example, if you're going to compare the politics of a particular region or an empire, you can examine bureaucracies, for instance, okay? How rulers send individuals to try to enact and to regulate the laws and decisions that they make. And you can now compare one civilization, one group, to another. Okay? So we're going to use this later on to compare civilizations and empires. But before we end this, we want to be able to examine one of the major consequences of these new kingdoms and cities that are established. And that is their creation. These cities and these city-states are going to create these impersonal states and governments. In other words, they're going to create order that is outside of the scope of family, kin groups, and so forth. And so these two things are in many ways historically, they're going to butt heads with one another. And sometimes they'll be similar, but this is a new way. The new states, the new sedentary societies are going to create states and governments that aren't necessarily or always simply based on family and family creation. So with that, keep that in mind. This theme is going to come back over and over in this class. From the contents of these last few slides, what I want you to do now is to generate context, an explanation of this unit that we just discussed here. So in other words, period zero, the early human societies, we have just generated some broad strokes as to what this unit is about. Go ahead and take this time and answer that question using 2 or 3 sentences to describe what period zero, this time period, is all about. So take some time to go ahead and address these questions and describe the context of the world in the time period 3000 BCE to 600 BCE. So go ahead and pause the video here and go ahead and make this particular response. Coming back, you may also find some of these elements in our unit overviews as well, where you can go ahead and if you're looking at our unit schedule, you'll see this at the top of the schedule. These are materials and items that the College Board has told us as teachers what to teach and how to engage you in these units here. So take a look at it. This also describes the context because from these ideas, we develop our lessons. So these ideas, I will take them and develop some of these lessons for you. Okay, so moving on for today, the creation of written material allows us to move from the archaeological dig site, in other words, the physical evidence that we see, to now what we call history. And history, in a lot of ways, is developed primarily by written text. And so when we examine history itself, we have to ask the question, one, what history is, but more particularly, why history exists as well here. And it has to do with a perspective and generating perspective. Okay, and our interpretation of perspective as well. Okay? And so I'm going to go through a sequence of slides here that may help you to understand a perspective and point of view here. Okay? So first of all, take a look at this map. Pause the video here to make some observations of this map. Okay. Now, if you're looking at it, I'm sure the one thing that you're examining is, oh, the map is upside down. But the reality is this, we are on a sphere that we call the Earth, and this sphere is in a three-dimensional space, whereby there is no up, there is no down, there is no left or right. It's a sphere in the Earth, right? So what is considered to be up or down, right? And so if we look at this map here, this in a sense is a map according to Australians. Here we are at the center of the map, where for them, up is south. It's a strange notion here. It's unfamiliar to us because it's a different point of view. Now, what point of view do we understand? Do we know? This is our normal world map. Okay. Why is it normal? You have to think about the point of view. Whose perspective is this map coming from? Well, if you see this line here, the international date line, the prime meridian, is centered upon Great Britain. Okay. Why is that so? Hey, we have to look at the history in terms of why this, you could say, biased map that we're used to is from a unique perspective, an English perspective. Because why? England has dominated much of the globe, and it's English ideas, as it turns out, that have pervaded what we see around the world here. Okay? And so you can look at a world map, and you could have one centered on China. Okay? Now, if we want to try to make a map that might be as accurate as possible, this might be it. The sizes are a little bit better, but again, hey, it's hard to take a three-dimensional sphere and put it on a two-dimensional surface. Okay? Other ideas in regards to point of view, for instance, right? So if you look at this political cartoon, right? On one hand, both are saying, look, we're going to be rescued, but the reality is neither is going to happen. What about one from a cultural perspective here? This is one you may have seen before. It might be familiar to you, right? But two different cultures as to what patriarchy and a male-dominated world might be here. And sometimes point of view is actually one where the writer or the author has a limited perspective or a limited understanding of the world, right? This is a world map according to Herodotus, who's often known as the father of history, right? This is the world that he lives in, basically the Mediterranean world. Okay, so hopefully you understand point of view and why we study history and why it's more complex than just simply a listing of events. Okay, now before we move on, in AP World History, there are various regions to help to solidify your understanding of the world. So these are some of the terms that are used. So in the class, please follow these items here. So this here is North America, South America, Mesoamerica or Central America, but in all three cases, North America, Central America, and what we call Latin America, this is going to include the Caribbean islands as well. Okay? Other regions are going to include Africa, particularly the notion of sub-Saharan Africa as a distinctively different region, Europe, Middle East and North Africa, or just the Middle East. You've got also the Mediterranean world. Okay. Northern Asia, Northeastern Asia, Russia might also work as well. South Asia, or the Indian subcontinent, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and finally Oceania. So these are regions that are utilized just as a little sidebar for us here. But our discussion of world history and the development of history, and if there are multiple point of view, if there are multiple histories, then the process of generating history, what we call the principles, the theories, and methodologies of scholarly historical research, or what we call historiography, is important, right? Because how we select material, documents, how it's presented in a class, how a video is generated, or some of the shortcuts that are necessary to simplify a video. the point of view, the perspective, the theories in regards to historical development, all of which is called historiography. So if history is the study of the past, how history is constructed, historiography is important because it generates multiple histories, multiple points of view. For instance, let me provide a example of this, the American Revolution. Now, the traditional understanding of the American Revolution is that it is about liberties, right? No taxation without representation. It's British tyranny, and so therefore the British colonists in the Americas had to rebel to create this new form of democracy. That's the traditional tale and story of the American Revolution. Okay? However, new historical research is going to see the American Revolution in different ways. Maybe the American Revolution itself is about liberties regarding the middle class, that it is economics, right? It's the drive of middling peoples who are saying like my ability to preserve my property is why they fought in the revolution in the first place here. That it is more so about economic liberties than it is about politics in this case here. You can also look at the American Revolution in a more global perspective, that this is just simply one colonial war that exists in the span of other colonial wars as well here. We can take a look at the connections between what's going on in Europe in regards to the revolutions in Europe and why the American Revolution is just a part of this new philosophical revolution. Or you can look at the American Revolution and say, it wasn't a revolution at all, because if you are a woman and you are a slave and they say all men are created equal and you look at your status and go like, really? Was this a revolution at all? Right? And so there are different perspectives that we see in regards to historical research and analysis. And so you're going to practice this. So previously you watched the film Guns, Germs, and Steel. Right? Jared Diamond presented an argument about the geographic luck being the primary reason by which there are haves and have-nots in the world. That modern-day income inequality occurs because of geographic reasons. Well, there's a response to this, and a passionate response as well. So much so that this author here ends up writing this article, and I had to blank out this particular part here. So what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take a look at David Correa's argument from this document. And what you're going to do is you're going to answer this short answer question set. And in this short answer question set, you are going to identify the author's primary interpretation. Now, for identifying primary interpretation, you can quote the document if you would like, but I would prefer that you use your own words to be able to identify what his interpretation of Jared Diamond's arguments is. In other words, he's recapping what Jared Diamond is going to say. What is that? You're going to take one historical example in part B of how Jared Diamond's primary claim is supported with history. So look at something specific. Look at the readings that we've done so far for homework as specific historical examples. You're going to need your own outside knowledge for part B. And finally, for part C, you're going to identify what the author said. What is his primary critique? In other words, why is Diamond wrong? Or what are some issues that he has from this particular passage? All right, we're going to end it here. So go ahead and answer this response as best as you possibly can.